Hey guys, it's Robin, RsIslandCrafts. Welcome to my craft room. Last Friday, I showed you the wonky stars that I was working on for my daughter's bed runner. This is a 6.5 inch, well, it's supposed to be a 6.5 inch finished block, and right now I trimmed them down to 6 inches. If you want to know why, just go ahead and see last week's video. I'll put it up in the iCard, and it'll explain why my blocks are a little bit smaller. Now last week when I made them, I did not trim any of the extra fabric from behind the star legs when I made these little 2.5 inch blocks here. So I thought this week I'd show you how to do it so that you can trim, two different ways you can trim it. Ultimately you're going to end up with the same block, but this way when you do it you won't have this extra bulk behind your block when you go ahead to quilt it and everything. And I want to say thank you to everyone who was helping me with this broadcloth. Several of you had mentioned that it is now part polyester, and that if I want to get rid of these wrinkles, that I should go ahead and lower the temperature of my iron. You guys were absolutely right. I dropped my iron down to just below a cotton setting, just enough to where I can have a little bit of steam if I need it, but not too much, just barely register. And it's made a world of difference with my blocks. Because as you can see here, these blocks didn't get a lot of pressing, and yet these did. They got pressed 2 or 3 or 4 times, and that's when they got that extra heat on them and caused them to get wrinkly. I've been making several blocks today, and not one of them has that wrinkle problem on it at all. So thank you guys so much. That's why I love this community. Everyone's so eager to help another person out so that they can have an enjoyable process and experience when they're working on their quilts. So I went ahead and I stitched one of my triangles, so one little leg of my star. And I'm going to go ahead and press this open now. And when I press this one open, I can see that it is definitely covering up all of the white here. So I always like to press it open first, or at least take it and fold it over just to make sure that it's going to cover everywhere I need before I trim off this little excess piece. You can use a rotary cutter if you want, but I've just been taking my scissors and I've just been trimming the white triangle as close to I can with the red part of the triangle here. If it sticks out a little, I don't worry about it, as long as it's not going below it so that it's less than the 1/4 inch. So you can do that before or after you press. Then I would go ahead and I would put my next piece on. As you can see, I've been doing a lot of chain sewing, so I didn't do just one at a time. So after I did all of them, I would go ahead and put my next piece on and decide where I wanted to put it. Make sure that it's going to cover this red one, because I want it to have that little point there so it has that little V. And I'm going to make sure that it's going to cover it up so that it covers up all of that white. So I'll go ahead and run it through the machine. You guys watched me do that last week, so I'm not going to do it again. And then when I was done, I know I swapped it out for a blue one. I'd stitched it through, and this is what I had. I'm going to check and make sure that I'm not going to see any of the white peeking through, and I can see plenty of blue on the back. Trim this off. Once again, I'm going to give it a nice press. You guys can go ahead and use a little steam if you have a better fabric than what I'm currently using, but I'm not going to change it out. It's going to work fine for this quilt. It's not something my daughter is going to need to wash very often. So then I have that all set. Now I'm going to go ahead and trim it up. I decided to go ahead and bring out my little 2.5 inch my little ruler here to trim these up with. You could do them with any size ruler, but I tend to just go ahead and I like to use this little ruler. I was using my 6.5 inch square ruler, but then I found that if I did it with this one, I can actually just cut around it and everything works out nice. And for that, I bring in my rotating cutting mat, and that allowed me to just whip through and trim all these up really quick. Now to trim them, I'm still going to use this white square as my guideline. I'm going to use these 2 corners here. If I were using my 6.5 inch ruler, I would line it up with the 2.5 inch mark here, and then my little corner here, and I'd make sure that I'm lined up the best as I can. If my square had shrunk and if I'd cut it wrong or anything like that, then I could go ahead and just trim these two edges here. If I'm using my little 2.5 inch ruler, I can just set it right on there. I can move it around to make sure that all of my fabric is going to be under this square. And then I can trim it, trim the second one. And then my mat allows me to spin it around. And then this time I just lined it up along the white fabric and trimmed off the third side. You only have 3 sides because the fourth side is the white fabric. And there you go. I have my 2.5 inch square ready to go into my block. Now if I wanted to, I could also square it up at this stage. Same process. Let's use this ruler this time so you guys can see it with this one. I would line up my 2.5 inch marks. If I were a little short on either side, just like an 1/8 of an inch or even a 1/16 of an inch, I just kind of like split the difference so there's a little bit of air on each side. But if yours is perfectly 2.5 inches, you do not have to worry about that at all. Make sure I'm lined up along the top and along this side. And then I would just go ahead and trim off that red. Then I would take it to my machine and I can add my next piece. Stitch this down and go through the same process. After stitching it and making sure it's going to cover up that white section, I trim this off with the scissors. I'd go ahead and iron this back, and then I would take my rulers and I would trim up along those edges. Let's trim one more, just so we definitely know we've got the idea of what we're doing here. I gotta say, I've had this Omni Grip ruler for a little while. I normally use this one with the yellow, but I really kind of like this greeny one, this yellow green that's kind of glowy. You can really see the numbers easily on this one. This one also has this 3-inch square with all the grid work in it, and that's nice. When I first started learning, this one has the same thing, but now that I've been doing this for a long time, I don't need all those little extra lines in here, and they just kind of get in the way. I tend to square up in different places just so I can avoid that section. So this one, I'm finding that I really like this one, and I might go ahead and switch over to using this one. See, so I can easily rotate this mat around and I don't have to bump into you guys. I really should bring this out more often. And then I can just line it up along the edge and trim off that excess. And once again, I have another leg of my star. So I hope that helps out anyone who didn't want to have that excess fabric in the back of their star. Because while this is nice and all, you're going to have that extra fabric and you're going to have to quilt through it. I don't have one put together yet like this, but you can already see that there's going to be a big difference. You're losing a whole bit of fabric back there. When we did it this way, it was really easy just to line up and trim anything that was over this white square. But once you get used to it, it's really not hard at all just to line up along these 2 corners of your square and then just trim the rest because we're doing 2.5 inch squares. So that's it for me this week. Just a quick little tip and a little change off of last week's tutorial. I'm going to keep working on these stars, so hopefully I can get this bed runner all set up and ready for my daughter in the next couple weeks. So until next time, you guys have a great week. Bye!